Welcome to the 56th broadcast of the T-roh Show. This is your host, Keith. Stu is unavailable today, so you're stuck with me. Let's talk. Last week we were talking about the go. We're going to talk about the social assistance program because the rules are if you have an objection, you have to come up with a solution. So we did have a solution, or do have a solution that we put together. It was called the Social Assistance Program, and it was under the Social Assistance Act of 2015. So we did this 2 years ago, and we really haven't pushed it much. We've been working on quite a few other things to get this put in place. But what it essentially does, because everybody says, "Well, you're going after our Social Security, so what are you going to do with it? How are you guys going to replace this, or what can we do, and all this?" So we don't want to create despair. So we're moving forward with bringing this out. It's old age privilege exclusive, handicap voucher program, unemployment vouchers, vouchers independent children, aid to the blind, and federal or general provisions. Now, the a voucher is nothing more than a witness. So, excuse me. So what we're saying is, it takes the basic selfishness of people to make this work, of which we know we have ample fuel for. So the program is based on after 65 years in one day, you no longer need money. You get a voucher, and that's what we call the voucher privilege. And what that means is if a man comes to your house or a woman comes to your house and gives you a bill to say, "Hey, I'll paint your house for 5,000 or 4,000 or whatever it is," um, you have a voucher to sign that pays for that. That individual who painted your house will be able to take that voucher to the bank and deposit that into their account. And that's where the money creation comes in. So rather than getting rid of the disabled like the communists and socialists like to do, they like to, they're doing it in Hungary right now, and start killing them off, which is what I call cruel and unusual. It's been their only way to handle it because they can't think outside of anything other than duh. That's what a communist does. We have a voucher program that turns those people that are handicapped or in a wheelchair or have some kind of they can't work and all that into gold. And I'll give you for instance, in other words, they're the source of money circulation. So the more they are taken care of, the more money people will get or have the ability to earn. So it turns everything around. It's a different way of thinking. So when you see somebody that is in a wheelchair, you're not looking at them going, "Oh man, we got to take care of them," and that's where my tax dollars go to take care of them on a monthly check through the Ponzi scheme of the Social Security Administration, or turn it into some political thing like a socialism program. They have a voucher they can sign, and if they can't sign, they're not physically able to sign. They're the one that takes care of them can sign for them. So the main thing people have and the problems they have and the worries they get is they don't want to get sick. They don't want to be dependent on other people, number one, but they don't want to get sick because they know that hospital bill is just going to tear them to pieces. But if you have a voucher to pay for the bill, you're going to get the best treatment you could ever imagine. You don't have to go through an insurance company. You don't have to go through any of this stuff. You just sign the voucher and everybody's paid. You're going to have 5 doctors in your room, and they're going to take care of you very well because you have the ability to pay. So why is it that when we turn 65 in one day, automatically we're treated like dirt? We should be treated like rich. The extreme rich, where they get their butt kissed all the time. So why can't you kiss somebody's butt that's 65 in one day? I figured if you made it that long, you pretty much earned it. So you work hard your whole life and everything else. After that, under this program, you don't need um, you don't need to worry about having all this money saved up and how am I going to pay my bills. All that stuff is taken care of, and it's not at the expense of anyone else. So you still have your independence, and it's a privilege. And the reason why we made it a privilege is because we didn't want people to start buying things for other people. This is just for you. It's for you in your old age, and take care of your bills so you can remain as independent as you possibly can, as long as you possibly can. That's the thing behind all this. You can still live in your own home. If you are having physical issues or whatever, you can pay a nurse to come in and take care of you. There's all kinds of things you can take care of with this program. So if you see somebody there that's is in a wheelchair, or has had a stroke or something like that, you don't have to worry about them. They're going to be taken care of because they are the source of the money supply through these voucher programs. So, for instance, you'll take 20 people on a block that live on a block, and you have 2 or 3 old folks that are over 65. They're probably going to have the nicest houses in the neighborhood because people are going to be going to them. If work is scarce, they're going to be going to him, say, yeah, you need anything done? So they're going to have the best of everything. And those homes will be taken care of for the next generation. So this whole thing works out for everybody. And this is the Social Assistance Act of 2015. We're going to have to update it, because it's under the old seal. But it does what it says it's going to do. So you don't have to worry about, you're not going to be stuck at a $1,200 or $800 or $400 a month on Social Security Ponzi scheme, where you're reliant on future taxpayers to pay your monthly check. It's a ridiculous scheme. It's blue sky. In other words, you're selling blue sky to people, and it's a joke. So we came up with the voucher program, and basically what it does is based on judicial proceedings, where if work is done, you're the witness. You're a witness. Yes, this work was done. So you can have your lawn cut, and obviously there's going to be people trying to take advantage of it, and those that do take advantage of it lose the penalty is they don't get the voucher program after age 65. So that's a good incentive to stay honest. That's how that works. So for instance, if you got a guy that's cutting somebody's lawn and they try to they try to force the individual to, or the one over 65, the voucher, one that signs the voucher, they try to say, well, it costs $2,000 to do this. You're going to sign this for $2,000. Well, the Social Assistance Board is going to know that that's fraud, just to cut somebody's lawn.
Yes, and this also applies to disabled people too.
Yeah. So we know that. So the guy who did the lawn care, when you do things like that, you're putting your own voucher program in jeopardy at age 65. Because what happens is if the work is backed, in other words, the money that's there is backed by labor, that's fine. We have no issue with that. When you try to get more, you're creating inflation, which hurts everyone. And you render the money itself inflated, and eventually, if we keep going like that, it's gonna cost you $1 billion for a friggin' loaf of bread. So we don't want that to happen, and that's why that penalty is there, and that's why it's a privilege to do this. So the board handles a lot of this stuff. And then you have payments upon death. It says if any individual dies before attaining the age of 65, there shall be paid to his or her estate an amount equal to what was saved, if so posited into the Office of the Treasury for the United States of America. So all these things, nothing's stolen. Government doesn't take anything. It all goes back to the families. It's there for everybody to enjoy, and that's basically what should be done. And there's a method of liquidating the vouchers. It's basically nothing more than a bill that's liquidated. That's all it is. It's just a very simple process. It's not hard to understand once you're doing it and to understand what's going on. So we don't want to, come up with these checks that we got to give people, $1,200 a month or $1,500 a month and all this. We just give them vouchers. So it even shows, and it's not just for, what do you say, taking care of you and all this kind of thing. You can go have some fun. If you want to go traveling or you want to do what you want to do, you can use the vouchers for that too. You should be able to enjoy your life. And after the age of 65, you should be able to enjoy all that. You've earned it. You worked hard your whole life, so there's no reason not to be able to enjoy something like that. So if you want to travel, you want to do this, you want to do that, we can work things out with the board, Social Assistance Board, to create those programs. This is the basic skeleton of the program. Right here, the act it was just to start it, and so they can expand it. They can talk to Treasury, make sure that nothing's being, travel industry is being funded. All these things are being funded through people that previously were or looked upon as being a drag on society or a burden. So all of a sudden, these people become gold. And we're talking about, mentally impaired. We're talking about all kinds of things that are there that people look upon as or have been shunned from society itself. And it is in place. And what we're doing is working on changing the way the country is set up, which I'm going to show you here in just a little while, or just a few minutes, how this is actually set up. Just get your pills out because this is going to make you mad. But and we've got we're working on getting rid of that situation and that legal framework to put a system in that is good for everyone. And so you don't have to worry about all this craziness. I mean, there's a lot of countries that could adopt this type of system, and I think that they would love it on how it works. It would also bring back the respect, and I think in this country it's really bad. People don't respect the elderly at all. So we'd like to bring some of that back there, because if you start turning them into gold, it's going to be, can I help you across the street? I need a, do you need anything? Is there anything I can help you with? That kind of deal, because they're like a source of work and a source of everything. So your selfishness and your greed actually fuels protecting that goose that laid the golden egg to make sure they're okay. So we're just taking what's naturally there, and turning it into a positive. And that's the whole point of it, just to turn everything that is ugly about human beings into something that works out. The result is positive. So that's how this is designed. I don't know if I need to explain any more of it. If you want to learn more, we can get on the National Assembly call, and we can all talk about it and to give everybody ideas of how this actually works. It's a really cool system. I love the system. It takes all that worry away, everything away. In other words, you don't worry about getting old. You're actually looking forward to it. And you're looking forward to being able to have that financial freedom that you've always wanted. Even if you didn't achieve it, you at least get the experience of living as the rich live, for a certain period of time. And you should be able to experience that. That is something that you can witness and say, man, that was really cool. That was a lot of fun. Because, what's this world about? It's about experiences, and which teaches everybody, when you have experience, you have knowledge, and that automatically comes. So even if you wanted to go back to school and learn stuff, you can do that. Use the voucher program to go back to work or go back to school and learn more. Learn what you didn't learn before, didn't have time to learn before. Say you had to take care of your younger siblings because your parents were worthless. So you can now make up for that through the voucher program. So I think it's going to be very beneficial for everyone. Now let's get to pure ugly, because this gets really ugly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to explain how the system is set up today, and we're going to remove one more layer of that onion. We keep peeling it back, and everything else, and everybody's asking, why is this taking so long? It's because you're being shown what's happening and how the system is set up so that you fully and completely understand it, and you can still think, and you're not living in rage. Because you can think your way through this and think your way out of it. So that's the purpose of this. So something was bothering me about this this protocol here, and this was the trafficking in persons. And the trafficking in persons is still valid. We have the whole system set up now to where we can hear a case within about 5-10 minutes, because all cases are based on trafficking in persons. And then we're going to show you how in just a few minutes. But there was some odd things about this, because countries that sign on to treaties can make reservations, and that would be this here. This is called reservations here. And it looks okay at first. You're looking at it, and according to United States, implement paragraph 1B of the convention of the extent provided under its federal law, and blah 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 blah. Then it talks about the United States of America reserves the right to assume obligations under this protocol in a manner consistent with the fundamental principles of federalism. So they want to cover things there and cover things there. So this is all basic blah blah BS to me. Under these reservations, then they go into understanding, and this was the weird part. But it says, in accordance with Article 15, paragraph 3, the United States declares it does not consider itself bound by the obligations set forth in Article 15, paragraph 2. So you move over to the treaty, and then you start looking at Article 15, paragraph 2. And it's any dispute between two or more parties concerning interpretation of the application of this protocol, blah, 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 blah. And the reason why they didn't want to be subject to it is because they don't want to be subject to the International Court of Justice in The Hague. That's why they didn't do that. So you see what they're doing, when you're reading the reservations. And it really tells the truth. So you see the International Court of Justice here. So they didn't want to be a part of that. So they said, okay, well, we're going to give you, 2-3 paragraphs of BS to tell you that we're not going to be subject to the International Court of Justice. That's basically all that says. So you go down to the understanding, and you say the United States of America understands the obligation to establish the offenses of the protocol as money laundering predicate offenses in the light of Article 6, paragraph 2B of the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, as requiring states parties whose money laundering legislation sets forth a list of specific predicate offenses to include in such a list a comprehensive range of offenses associated with trafficking in persons. So we go to Article 6, paragraph 2B. I just told you what they were doing, and it probably just went right past you, not realizing what was just what you just saw. So I'm going to point that out. So you go to Article 6, 2B, assistance to enable their views and concerns to be presented and considered at appropriate stages of criminal proceedings against offenders in a manner not prejudicial to the rights of the defense. That probably just went right past you too, so I'm going to hit that again. Assistance to enable their views and concerns to be presented and concerned at appropriate stages of criminal proceedings against offenders in a manner not prejudicial to the rights of the defense. What does that have to do with money laundering? So they understand it, understands the obligation to establish offenses in the protocol as money laundering predicate offenses in light of Article 6, paragraph 2B. They understand it as money laundering predicate offenses. So they're applying money laundering deals with this in Article 6.2b. But Article 6.2b has nothing to do with that. Article 6.2b says assistance to enable their views and concerns to be presented and considered at appropriate stages of criminal proceedings against offenders in a manner not prejudicial to the rights of the defense. Enable their views and concerns to be presented. So this is how I see this. Now, many others may see this differently, but I tell you what, let me go over here to New York. Now, this is the New York money laundering laws, and this is where a lot of these laws come from, because that's where Manhattan Island is, and that's where the Bank of New York Mellon is, and the United Nations and all that. So we found this New York money laundering laws, the basics. For the purpose of New York's money laundering statute, criminal conduct is defined as any act in violation of New York state laws. Any act. So that's how they define it. So a criminal conduct is defined as any act in violation of New York state laws. Now, let's go back. All of a sudden, laundering predicate offenses in light of 6.2b, Article 6.2b, they don't want to really be a subject to that. So, assistance to enable their views and concerns to be presented. So, you could be in court under a driver's license, registration, could be anything, traffic ticket or whatever. And right here, assistance to enable their views and concerns, you could be in there under what? Under criminal conduct is defined as any violation of state laws, which is you could be in there under money laundering. Now, even though it doesn't explicitly say it, they say it pretty clear here what it is. It's not there on the, well, I'm being charged with speeding. Okay, well, that's all good and well. Or I could be charged with a suspended license. Well, a suspended license means that you could that money that was used to to renew your license, it could be somewhere else under money laundering, because money laundering is basically an act that states where you don't know where the source of the money came from. Am I correct on that, John? I guess he's got to look for his
Yes,
pause.
Okay. Yeah, I had to find my mute button.
All right.
That's correct.
Right. So money laundering could be, in other words, if you get $100 from somebody, two people down the line who had the $100 before could have gotten that from drugs or terrorism or something like that, and then you end up with the money, you could be nailed for money laundering under the anti-money laundering laws. There's no rights there. There's no due process. That's out the window. So what I'm saying here is since under criminal conduct is defined as any act in violation of New York state laws, it's not real specific. It didn't say criminal conduct is defined as any act in violation of New York Money laundering state laws. It wasn't very specific. It was wide open. So your due process is
Basically,
completely out the window.
yes, sir. Basically, when you're charged with money laundering, there are no laws. All laws are abandoned at that time. Therefore, you have no due process whatsoever.
Right. It says here it's a definition. It says a person is guilty of money laundering when knowing that the property involved in one or more financial transactions represents the proceeds of criminal conduct. He or she conducts one or more of such financial transactions, which in fact involves the proceeds of specific criminal conduct with intent to promote the carrying on of criminal conduct or engage in conduct constituting a felony. That's under what? Tax law. Okay, which brings us to where? Where's the connection? The offshore internal revenue trusts that are dealing with taxes. So you see how that got slipped in. Okay, so you have an offshore trust where your person is trafficked to, then it comes back into the states of the union as an enemy. And now they make it to where they can arbitrarily charge you with money laundering with under the face of another charge. So somebody would say, okay, your license is suspended. They just arbitrarily do that. I mean, I've seen that 100 times. Well, your license is suspended. You piss them off, the license is suspended. That's the first thing they go to, and that's usually your driver's license, and that's connected to all this. It's connected to that. The driver's license is connected to the offshore trust, which is an internal revenue tax trust. So what are we looking at here? The offshore trust can only deal in taxes and collections. It only understands that. Okay, I'm talking about the trust itself. So what do they have to do? They have to deal with money all the time because it deals with the taxes and collection. So let's go to a child snatching, okay, like a CPS. CPS comes in and says, well, you're being charged with neglect when your children are fine. I'm not saying that happens all the time, but it does happen. Okay, about 90% of the time. So 10% of the time, they're pretty good about getting children out of messes. But the rest of the time, no, they're just taking them. And so you get charged with neglect. So you're thinking, no, I don't neglect the children. That's not what they're talking about. Under this protocol here, based on what the reservations were in the trafficking in persons, they completely changed the intent of the trafficking in persons to money laundering and being able to state their not giving you assistance to enable their views and concerns, that you as a parent were money laundering, even though you're being charged with neglect. So money laundering would be like you're neglecting to protect your children from criminal activity, but they're not stating that outright because they're not providing assistance to enable their views and concerns to be presented and considered at appropriate stages of criminal proceedings against offenders in a manner not prejudicial to the rights of the defense. They're not saying that. They're saying you're being charged with neglect. A lot of it's just being neglect. They don't say anything else. It's just neglect. What do you mean neglect? What kind of neglect? What neglect are you talking about? Well, since everything is coming from an offshore trust and internal revenue, they're talking about money laundering because that's all the trust understands. I'll give you another, for instance, so you'll see what I'm talking about. And so this doesn't sound so crazy to a lot of people. Now, the bankruptcy of the United States, this was done in 1993. This is volume 33, page H1303. Now, James Trafficant spilled the beans. I'm sure this has been put out there plenty of times, so I'm not saying anything that a lot of people don't know. However, there's a different point of view here. He said, we are here now in Chapter 11. Members of Congress are official trustees presiding over the greatest reorganization of any bankruptcy entity in the world history. The U.S. government. We are setting forth, hopefully, a blueprint for our future. And I've got the video on this. I actually put this on the North American National Party Facebook page so people could see this. And he did say this. And I have the video on there so you can see it for yourself. And it says, we are setting forth, hopefully, a blueprint for our future. There are some who say it is a coroner's report that will lead to our demise. This is a little blurry, so for me also, so just, it's not your screen. It is an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act, March 9, 1933. 48 Stat 1 Public Law 89-1719. This is declared by President Roosevelt, being bankrupt and insolvent. House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress, M Session, June 5th, 1933. Okay, a joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause dissolved the sovereign authority, which in my opinion they never had. It was just a private membership association done by the Masons. So this was planned in my opinion. It says of the United States in the official capacities of all United States government officers and departments, and it's further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. Okay, so if it exists today in name only, this is what you've got. This is how a lot of this operates. What usually happens here is this is the beginning stages of this type of system where it runs into in name only. The treasurer and officers of the government, of a government, what they usually do is a lot of times they're having trouble with funding or getting their money recognized in the beginning. So when that happens, a international banker will contact them and say, hey man, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to open up a line of credit for you. I've got a line of credit over here in so-and-so country. Open up a line of credit for you. So they do an audit and they find out how much the country's worth. And then usually those international bankers will turn around and they will all right, sorry about that, folks. Due to background noise, we had to pause and we'll move forward again. So what usually happens is when a international banker approaches a nation or a government, or it could even be a town, what they'll do is they'll offer you a line of credit, and they do an audit, and then you give them the audit. They transfer that over to their bank account, and they open up a line of credit for you. And when that happens is the first time you write a check, what happens is now the property or the nation itself has accepted the line of credit on interest, and it becomes a split title. The international banker becomes trustee, and the people running that government become trustees. Those offices automatically turn into trusts. The whole nation turns into a trust. And that's under Article 2 of the UDHR. They'll talk about something being in trust, a country being in trust. So when the banker does that, he wants interest on those the line of credit and the loan. So that's when taxes start. So if y'all remember when Reagan was saying, he says the people can't even cover the interest on these loans through their taxes. So your taxes are going to interest on loans. That's all they're going to. It's not like you're paying for the government. It's not what's happening. So what happens is in 1933, when the United States became operating under in name only, all of the offices became agents. And that's why you're seeing all these agencies everywhere. Agent this and agent that. So you'll see a state government and you'll see a governor. Well, a governor is just an agent for the offshore international banker. That's all he is. His office exists in name only. So it kind of explains what's happening. So you're just dealing with agents of an offshore bank, offshore trust, where all the assets went to, even the persons. So they put the people up as collateral after that, and their persons went offshore in violation of trafficking in persons. They're breaking all kinds of laws because they're doing it under contract, but they're still breaking all kinds of international laws, which means the loan that they gave you wasn't valid in the first place. Okay, because if it was a valid loan, it would be payable. And since this is not payable, and since Reagan said the taxes aren't even covering the interest, that tells you that it's an inflated loan. It's not there. It's just created out of thin air, and they're doing it. The intent is there to traffic persons. The intent is there to commit all these crimes. Intent eventually comes out. Okay, so the reason why I'm saying this is if you go back to the offshore trust, you'll notice that it only deals in taxes and collections. Well, that's a receiver. And if it's all it deals with, which is taxes and collections, then the only thing it's going to charge is money laundering so that they can get their taxes and collect their interest and do all this other stuff and collect assets and all that. So that's the reason why I'm saying that's what's really going on. Um, so let me share screens again. Okay, so a lot of this should start making sense. And we do know the beneficiaries that are doing this. So this is a Washington Times article. It says governments occasionally pass laws with good intent, but which backfire because they are poorly thought out and create perverse incentives, making the situation far worse. Well, governments didn't pass the law. That was a bylaw of the trust that they're working under. Remember, they're agents for the trust. The United States exists in name only, so those offices within that charter, company charter, are vacant. They're gone. They were insolvent, so they disappeared. So they kept them in name only because they didn't want to tell the people, hey, we're going to traffic your person down here, and we've got a debt we can't pay. We're foreign to the states of the union. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in there, we're going to grab people out of the states of the union, your person, and then we're going to use your labor to take care of our debt to our international banker. If that starts making sense. It says the current effort to stop money laundering has turned into a disaster for the global poor, who can no longer get bank accounts or easily and legally transfer money to their relatives in poor countries. The anti-money laundering laws and regulations have made the international trade and investment more expensive, thus perpetuating poverty. They have destroyed much legitimate financial privacy and have undermined the rule of law by destroying due process. Serious drug dealers, criminals, tax evaders, and terrorists can find plenty of legal and illegal ways to launder money. So once again, it's one of those laws that go after honest people and not the criminals themselves. And that's how these guys operate. It said in 1919, the 18th Amendment to the Constitution was passed prohibiting the manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors. It was a disaster. A large portion of the population refused to go along with it and found ways to acquire and consume booze despite the law. That's the truth. Prohibition provided huge profits for bootleggers and gave rise to organized crime. The situation became so bad that in 1933, the 18th Amendment was repealed. More recently, a so-called Affordable Care Act was passed with the intent of providing health insurance to all Americans, while enabling them to keep their own doctors and reducing medical costs. The system has not worked because it was predicated on the false idea that young, healthy people would be willing to buy high-cost insurance to subsidize the elderly and the ill. Well, you've got that taken care of in the Social Assistance Act. This has not happened. People have lost choice in healthcare providers, while the cost to the taxpayer have soared. Now, that's the taxpayer to the international banker, not to any form of government. You have to understand that. You only became taxpayers when the international banker came in and foreclosed. and he put everything into a trust offshore. So the offshore trust, internal revenue trusts, are holding stolen property is what they're basically doing right now, because they got it from the states of the union, not the United States. Remember, the states of the union are foreign to the United States. So they went into the states of the union and started stealing a bunch of assets to keep themselves afloat. Because out of necessity, it is in the process of being repealed before it leads to bankruptcies for more insurance companies and even government. Because money laundering is normally defined as transforming the profits of crime into apparently legitimate assets. In the United States before 1986, it was not a separate crime, and hence there was no criminal specialty in money laundering. With the increasing concern about the expansion of the drug trade, the first anti-money laundering bills were passed in the 1980s, as well as the increasing legalization of asset forfeiture. See, that's the offshore banker. That's what he's doing. So once you really see what's going on here, you'll understand how the country is set up. That all these so-called public officers that you have are nothing more than agents for the offshore bank or for the international banker. So let's take the Constitution and everything out, and all your state constitutions out. You were dealing directly with an international banker. You're under his thumb, and whatever he wants to do, he does. That's how it works. Because after 2001 terror attacks, the rationale for anti-money laundering effort increasingly became to prohibit terrorist finance. And over the past decade, the rationale has increasingly become to prevent tax avoidance and evasion. Remember, they keep using the word rationale. This was an excuse. And this is also hiding the international banker behind something that you think is there, but there's no substance to it. So we're peeling that onion back. We're peeling that layer back, because your Constitution that you so hardly believe in has been in name only for years. It's gone. Blue pill, red pill. Got it? It's gone. It's not there. Money laundering fits under the definition of vague law because, unlike murder or robbery, it is not a crime of an act but one of intent. Two different people can engage in the same physical transactions. But if one intends to hide the source of the proceeds of funds and the other does not, they can be treated very differently. This leads to many problems and substantial prosecutorial abuse. Gee, we haven't seen that, have we? It is not only banks and financial institutions that are supposed to know the source of their clients' funds, but also such diverse people as car dealers, pawnbrokers, real estate agents, and on and on. Often it is not considered good enough to know the source of the customer's funds, often a near impossibility, but the source of the funds of the customer's customer. So this is why they're trying to push, under anti-money laundering laws, this is why they're trying to push cashless societies, so you can be safe from any criminal activity. There's another safety thing there. We're not gonna abuse you. Okay, that's basically what it is. We're not going to abuse you if you just do what we tell you, and that way electronically we can track where the money came from, and then you're safe. You're covered. That's why they're pushing the chip and the money laundering and all. It's all just basic control that's attached to the British Israel Union, which is going into world government. That's all it is. They're just herding you there. Okay, the result is that the banks and their financial institutions increasingly refuse to open accounts for low-income people, who are then forced to deal in cash and with those in the financial underground. Now, that you see how the Washington Times did that? They turned it into, if you deal with cash, you're in the financial underground. So while they're telling you the truth, they're also telling you, they're trying to put seeds in your head that says that if you deal in cash, you're dealing with the financial underground. So it makes the article look intentional and intentionally good towards you, but they're actually messing with your head. There is a very high fixed cost for banks and others to do due diligence on their customers. The cost being roughly the same for a $5,000 deposit as a 500,000 or a 5 million deposit. Given the massive penalties, banks and other financial institutions are subject to for making even an unintentional mistake, their safest course of action is to drop small customers. Okay. Now, the ever increasing compliance costs on financial institutions have resulted in much less consumer choice, as small banks and others are forced into mergers because of these costs. Americans living abroad find it increasingly difficult to open bank accounts regardless of their income and wealth status, as growing U.S. financial imperialism, using a anti-money laundering campaign as an excuse, causing foreign banks to refuse to deal with U.S. persons. This is a fact. I've seen this. You notice they say U.S. persons. These U.S. persons have been trafficked. Recent academic and think tank studies show the situation only getting worse, all cost, no gain. It says there are infinite ways to launder money. And a friend who is an expert in finding proceeds of a crime just sent me a list of a number of ways that he has seen that are almost undetectable and unprovable. I refrain from printing them here in order to avoid being accused of aiding the criminal class. That's that right there. That is a socialist move. That's that you know you're living in a communist country when you can't do that. The point is that a smart and rich can find plenty of ways to launder money, but the poor, including poor countries, and the honest pay a huge price for the all additional compliance costs, which reduce to productive global capital formation and real incomes. So this is actually after the honest. Okay, now listen carefully what I'm about to show you. The beneficiaries of these laws and regulations are all of the international bureaucrats at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. That's where your tax money is going. Financial Action Task Force. That's where your tax money is going. United Nations. That's where your tax money is going. That's where you're paying taxes to. And the International Monetary Fund. That is where your tax money goes. Who formulate and enforce the rules while enjoying tax-free salaries, and of course, the liberty-hating political class who has gained more power over others' lives. That is the very definition of trafficking persons. Anti-money laundering laws and regulations can neither be cost-effective nor can they avoid the destroying basic liberties, and thus need to go the way of prohibition. Okay, so now you know what who's behind every bit of it, who the beneficiaries are, which would be the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Financial Action Task Force, United Nations, and International Monetary Fund. And y'all thought you've been sitting around waiting for United Nations tax to come in to prove that that the Antichrist is here under a world government. It's been going on since the 80s, folks. That's 30 years. It's been going on for 30 years. You've been paying taxes to the United Nations for 30 years. Half of most of your lives that are listening to this, or your whole life, you've been paying taxes to them for a long time. You've been trafficked your whole life. Now, they may have gotten away with it if they had done the Social Security Ponzi scheme for that generation and stopped at the next generation. But since they go from generation to generation, those new babies are not responsible for whatever debt that was contracted by people that, hell, you don't even know, never even met, saw. You don't even know them. So this is definitely trafficking in persons. And when you realize that you are, in fact, paying taxes to these entities, the International Monetary Fund and all them, these are the beneficiaries of these laws since the 80s. And these folks are what? can neither be cost effective nor that can avoid destroying basic liberties. And they basically state that who formulate and enforce the rules while enjoying tax-free salaries, and of course, the liberty-hating political class. Now, that is a way of saying a communist organization, which is connected to today. It's connected to Antifa, the Lawyers Guild, the American Bar Association, all those people running your courts. So you have communists running your courts. It's connected to the Judges Association. And like we said, all those public offices went private into private membership associations. So what happened is now that they deal in name only, in order to protect them under a so-called constitution, they made all those offices that you know or used to know as public, like governor and secretary of state and all that, they're all now private. They're private agents for the offshore trust run by the international banker that opened up the line of credit for the United States during the Civil War. That's why everything's confusing. That's why things change on a daily basis. That's why laws aren't really laws. Well, they changed the law. Well, this is law. That's law. They changed the rule here. Oh, this is changed over here. Well, that's changed over there. It's because you have an international banker just changing his mind every day. He's greedy. He's addicted to the deal. He's addicted to all these things. You're dealing with an addict. You'll understand that? He's a nut job. He'll be sitting there on his deathbed trying to make a phone call to make the deal. He loves making deals. They're addicted to money. They're addicted to power. They're addicted to all these things. So they're constantly changing their mind. Every day they wake up, it's something brand new. They don't even think right. It's like dealing with a coke addict. So the only stable government you have left is the government of the United States of America, to bring those states of the Union back and to get out of this stupid mess that these addicted, liberty-hating political class communists, socialists have control. And this is why we have to deal with this nefarious trust, offshore nefarious trust, get that out of the way in order to get relief in and start turning the country back around and changing it back to a positive direction, where you don't have to worry about your grandmother and grandfather being put into a home and abused and basically killed, which we saw in a video the other day. Killed by the nurses, basically laughing and having fun while somebody's dad was dying, who was a veteran, I think. Okay, so that's your position. And this trust here, when you do a resident declaration, we're removing your person from this whole situation here. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. You're directly, you don't have a constitution, guys. There's nothing stopping anything. All the rules are coming from an offshore trust run by those trustees, implemented by agents, and at the whim of the international banker who is nothing more than an addict to money and power and everything else, and he changes his mind every day. That's why the laws keep changing. Everything's changing constantly. It's because you're dealing with a wackadoodle. So I keep repeating this and saying this over and over so you get it, you understand, it starts sinking in. And what appears to be law is not law. It's offshore trust law. The art is for the international banker to make it appear as if it's coming from some sort of government. That's an art. And anybody that says, hey, it's not coming from a government, well, you're a sovereign citizen. These are valid laws. They use words, they use the lawyers, the agents for the international banker use words like invalid, invalidate, and all this other kind of crap to push the narrative that all this is legitimate. But as you can see, they had to fit this particular protocol into their money laundering narrative because it's an offshore trust. It deals with internal revenue. So it has to fit within the character of the offshore trust. So when they signed it, they turned it into tried to legitimize a trafficking in persons offshore trust into legitimizing tax collection, which is nothing more than interest to an international banker who created the money out of thin air in the first place. Does that make sense? Is there anything I'm missing, guys? John? Guess not. All right. Thanks for listening to the 56th broadcast of the t-roh Show. Please play this over and over again. I went quickly, so you'll need to play it over and over again. I like to stuff everything in at least an hour, so that you don't have to spend the rest of your life listening to a video or a 3 or 4 hour video. And you can play it over and over again to pick up what the narrative and the picture I'm trying to show you, so that you understand your situation. So thanks for listening to the 56th broadcast of the t-roh Show. We'll see you next week.